Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Book Clubs Across Borders third session between Karachi and Kabul. Kabul is just having some technical issues with their sound and they're going to be connected very soon. But because the time has started, we should start our programming and they can join in. So the book that we're going to be discussing today is The Sea Prayer by Khalid Hosseini. It is a conversation between a father and a child who are traveling by sea. And it talks about the relationship between a parent and brings to our focus the dilemma of migration and the absolute trauma of being a refugee. And it humanizes certain events which we all are experiencing in our lives right now. And the book was inspired by a photograph that I am sure most of you must have come across as well. And that was of a Syrian refugee child who was washed up and showed up at the by sea in Europe. And it got a lot of international media coverage, and it kind of brought the plight of the refugees fleeing from the war in Syria, and what Khalid Hosseini did, which he has done throughout most of his writings very beautifully, is bring to us what a human being feels when they are going through these circumstances and incidents.
Alia, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Sorry for interruption. Okay, yeah, we are ready, okay?
Lovely. So I was just explaining to everybody that the book that we're going to be discussing today is Sea Prayer by Khalid Hosseini. This book talks about the plight of refugees and uses a dialogue between a father and son to bring to us the story of what is experienced by people who are in a war-torn area and the trauma that they experience. And it is a beautiful book. It has lots of illustrations, which kind of help us as we are building our narrative. And on that note, I'd like to have some students from Karachi who can give us their opinion on what they thought about the book and any particular angles that rose that they would like to discuss further as we proceed into the book club. Karachi.
Alia, just a second. Before we start the conversation, I would like to introduce our guest speaker for the session today. Today, Dr. Sarina Haq is joining us as a guest speaker. Dr. Haq, she is a professor. She's a literature professor. She has taught in a lot of schools and colleges in Lahore and other cities as well. Her book, Cultural Confessions in Khalid Hosseini's Works, is basically an academic, a non-fiction book on the writings of Khalid Hosseini. And before this session, I was talking to her, told me that her focus in this book was on the Kite Runner and 1,000 Splendid Suns. But of course, she'll also be a part of this conversation, and I really encourage you all to talk to her and ask her questions about her experience in writing and, of course, about Khalid Hosseini's work as well. So I think we can go over to Dr. Haq, and she can give us a brief introduction as well.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting me for this lovely session. I'm so glad to see young faces interested in books and reading books, most importantly, because see, sometimes the difference between book and text is that the book lies on the shelf, but the text is something that you engage with, you indulge with, it takes you in. So that's the beauty of it. And if you all are reading, that's just absolutely amazing. Our dilemma is that a lot of students and a lot of young crowd is not reading so much these days, especially because of the digital visuals that are available. But I'm so glad that this organization is promoting reading. With reference to Khalid Hosseini, well, my research for this particular book and my MPhil was also focused on Khalid Hosseini's works. My first book was Sand and the Castle, a collection of short stories. So that was also based on the concept of home, displacement, diaspora, and relocation. In the same context, you have The Kite Runner, where there is a lot of displacement, of course, diaspora, and in Sea Prayer also you see the element of displacement. And the problem that arises with displacement is that the whole concept of home becomes ambivalent, it becomes fluid. I called my first book Sand and the Castle because each one of us believes that our home is a castle. But because of the element of sand in it, it's going to be fluid at all times. And that's the beauty of home. You can feel at home even in the darkest of environment, and you may not feel at home even in your home house, the building that you are in. I've known people who say that we felt at home even in a prison cell. So home is a very ambivalent, fluid entity. And that's why for refugees, I've also come across refugees, I've met them, I've made friends with them, to Afghan refugees as well. And I have some very good friends who moved to America later on. At the time of the refugee crisis in 1980s, that's when I met them. That's why I was also intrigued by it. And I think my interest in Afghan literature grew at that time because I made friends who were Afghans. So this book, which is Cultural Confessions and Khaled Hosseini's works, my idea was to find out the plural truths within history as well as fiction. So it's about coalescence of history and fiction. For me, history is monologic because it is dictated upon. It is the perception or the perspective of one individual or an institute. But literature has the capacity to entertain a dialogue, to engage in a dialogue, to open a dialogue and a debate, because it has so many characters, so many, and I'm saying inanimate and animate characters, which allows us to see multiple perspectives. And with Khaled Hosseini's works, I feel that he has the, one, he's androgynous. He can write like Maryam and Leila. He's, because he has experienced displacement himself, he questions, who am I? And he questions, where am I? Am I here? Do I belong here or there? Or do I belong both places, America and Afghanistan? So these are the questions that I feel are very important, which his works somehow or the other entertain. Because when you have a crisis happening in a topography, in a geographical landscape, you feel that, yes, you always try to blame the invader, but sometimes you have to take some form of responsibility as well. There is some kind of porous activity on the borders, or there's some kind of porous element that allows the invader to enter, and then allows eventually the Taliban to be there, and allows other forces to come to. So when he talks about redemption in the Kite Runner, he's asking for redemption for a whole cultural facade, a whole element of collective consciousness, that everyone is collectively responsible for anything that happens in a country. So that's why I chose Cultural Confessions. And then while doing my research, I realized that in America especially, there are many young teenagers, and I'm talking about the 2000 and 2001 or 2, who did not even know where Afghanistan was, or who were not aware. They only knew that it was a mountainous terrain with just fighters there. What Khaled Hosseini did was he humanized the land, he humanized the topography, he placed little humans in our perspective. So I have read many blogs by many young students in America who have been saying, and I've interviewed some as well, who said that we never knew that there were, we never imagined that a child crippled because of a war feels this way. Or there are women who actually feel that they can have a self as well, because we thought they were happy in their subjugation or whatever. So I feel that Khaled Hosseini's contribution has been tremendous, because he has humanized the little child in the sea. He has humanized women. He has humanized the culture that was prominent before the Russian invasion, and the fundamentalism that followed. He's humanized all of this to make it a package deal for everyone to relate to. So this was my understanding of it. If you have any questions, you may ask, please.
Thank you so much, Dr. Haq, for that lovely background into the work that you do, the kind of understanding that you have come at. And I think it opens up a lot of doors for our students to walk through, create their questions and pose them. And but before we get on to that, I would love for our students in Karachi to start the conversation by giving us an understanding of what they thought the book is all about, and what was the central issue that the book was trying to bring to the forefront, and connect it to the work that you do. So anyone in Karachi who would like to take that question, then we will move to Kabul, and then we'll go to Dr. Haq again. Karachi, over to you.
Hello, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Hi, I'm Kanza Muzaffar from the Citizens Foundation College, and I just wanted to tell about my feelings, that how I, felt after reading the book, because it's a, major worldwide issue that Syrians are not getting what they want. And I wanted to ask a general question from our author who researches on the books. Can I?
Yes, sure.
This question's, I really wanted to ask an author this question every time I read a book, that when they are writing a book, they try to be original, or they try to deliver what the readers want, like what their wishes, or how what are the trends going on, or they only, focus on what they want to write.
Okay, so interesting, there's this theory that the author is dead post 1960s. Everyone thought that the author is dead, but I'm working on a debate that author really never dies. Because whenever we read a book, we try to find out who the author is and where he or she, firstly, we also try to find out the gender of the author, he or she belongs to, and the era that that person belongs to. So we are interested in the experiences of the author because we feel that he or she does contribute to it. I know authors who have written, there's this author called Osama Siddiqui. He's written a book which starts from Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, and moves up to today's century. Hence, of course, he hasn't experienced any of that, but his experience with the books that he's read, the history that he's read. So why would he write, or why would I write, or any author for that matter, is because we want to, I have a motto that I tend to share with my students. We want to address stress. So if there is an issue out there, I'd like to address it head on and show it. And that's the only way to redress it. So it doesn't necessarily have to be something that I have experienced myself, but I know that I engage with everyone around me, even the inanimate objects. There's something called defamiliarization, which means when I also teach creative writing. So I tell my students when they don't know what to write, that defamiliarize yourself to your surrounding. Look around yourself. When you walk past, if you're going to your school, you walk past your guard on a daily basis. You really don't bother. But when you defamiliarize yourself and you look at the guard for properly, and then you will find a story there. You look at an animal for that matter, you will find a story there. Little inanimate, a leaf, you will find a story there. First, you have to defamiliarize yourself. Observation is required. So more than experience, I feel these elements are important. And we would like to I like to at least focus on subjects which need some kind of addressing and redressal. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, that answers my question. Thank you so much for answering my question. I really loved your answer.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Haq. So basically what Dr. Haq is trying to say is that the situatedness of the author, which could be a physical or a literature-based journey, actually plays a very key role in the story or in their writing style. On that note, let's go to Kabul and ask our friends at Kabul what they thought about the book, and if they have any questions and concerns that they'd like to pose for Dr. Haq. So Kabul, over to you.
Okay, does everybody hear us?
Yes.
Yes, we hear you.
Hi everyone. I am Mahida Sadiqi, a student of grade 10th at Pardesh Private High School. I know Khaled Hosseini. I have read his books, A Thousand Splendid Suns and the Mountains Echoed and the Kite Runners, and the last one, Sea Prayer. What I got from the book was that nobody wants to leave his or her country. No, we have a very popular proverb in Dari that says, "In no part of the earth becomes your home. Your home is your home. No place can be like that. In no elsewhere you feel that." And it says about the feelings of the father who feels himself less in power, who feels himself having not being able to protect his son, and the only thing he can do is just to pray for the sea to protect them and put them on a good situation. So I think that book, in a way, talks about the pains that are never spoken about. That book is from the depths of the pain, that says about the pains of immigration.
Thank you so much, Wahida. Could you hear Wahida?
Yes, thank you so much. That was very well put together, and I completely agree with you. One of the most important elements of Khaled Hosseini's writing is how he humanizes the whole, like he humanizes whatever he's trying to capture in when he's writing a book in Afghanistan, for Afghanistan. He's trying to capture what it feels to be an Afghan, what it feels to be proud of your Afghan heritage, yet feel disconnected with the reality that exists around you at that moment in time, because that reality that you are living in is a disconnect from what you know your own history to be. In the Sea Prayer, again, it's a dialogue between a father and a son, and it talks about the hopelessness and the trauma that is induced by war and forced migration, because, like you so rightly put, nobody wants to leave something that is familiar, that is warm, that is their own. And one of the most integral parts of owning a space in the world is your own home. But you have to, at certain times, because you feel that your life is at stake. So most of the times when we talk about migration or when we talk about safe passage, we're talking about safety as a life concern. And that is what is at the core of this book, that everyone is looking at these people who are coming in from Syria as people who are changing the diaspora of the countries that they're coming in, and they're bringing more cultures into them. But it is not these elements that one should be looking at. It should be the human in us, which should be connecting with the story of loss that they bring with them. And I think one of the other things that he completely tries to focus on in the book is that a lot of times these people take these journeys and they don't even know whether they will be able to find that safe passage, but just the hope that they might be able to is what takes them or gives them courage to take the journey. And on that note, let's go to Dr. Haq. And Dr. Haq, what I would like to know from you is, especially since you worked so much, on Khaled Hosseini, is that when Khaled Hosseini writes about loss, when he writes about migration, or when he writes about displacement, he writes from a very personal perspective, because he himself was an Afghan refugee who came to Peshawar, stayed in Peshawar, then moved to the United States, but always remembered his hometown of Afghanistan. When we look at that and we look at his writing and we talk about the situatedness of the writers, what do you think is the biggest message that he is trying to convey through his writing to the people around the world?
It kind of evolves with his books. Of course, the first book, The Kite Runner, I feel that it was the foremost in him was some pent up emotions within him that needed to be vented out, and regarding his feeling about a particular landscape that he has been taken away from. We have to understand migration on two levels. See, when a child migrates, when a parent migrates, is totally different. The parent migrates quite consciously and takes a conscious effort to do it for the betterment of his family and for something better, regardless if it's for life safety or for financial gain, economic gain, or studying or whatever. The parent, when he migrates or she migrates, it is for looking towards a greener pasture, a better future. The child follows. So it is not the child's decision. And sometimes you have children born in an environment which is alien to their parents, but it is not alien to them because they were born there. So it is totally different when a child migrates and a parent migrates. So it's called first generation migration and second generation migration. So Khalid Husseini is actually the child that migrated. It was not his decision to leave his land. It was his father's decision to do so. And his father thought that he would get a better life if he leaves this land at this particular moment. So his situatedness is actually quite related to what his father felt was better for him. It wasn't what he felt was better for him. Now, when that happens, the father has, because he's taken the conscious effort, he has to make a home out of the place that he has taken his family to. The child can remain disconnected to the place because it wasn't his choice, or he may try to become connected. Now that again is a very psychological, because again, I've talked about the psychological elements of moving out of a land. Also, when this wonderful girl from Afghanistan was talking about home being where you belong to, then you have to make your roots. It's called rootedness and rootedness. You find a route, a passage to kind of grasp the roots, because you have actually left your roots behind in that landscape. You will now have to form new roots. Khalid Husseini could do so because he came in as a child. And some people also, comprador, they call him comprador, that he's been writing for America. Because I have friends who were refugees and they moved to America, they would stay in touch. They stayed in touch with me, and they told me that America did take them very, they welcomed them. They gave them admissions in schools. They helped them out in housing. So that did happen. And when Khalid Husseini is writing in The Kite Runner about that experience, it did happen. Like a lot of Syrians were taken in very wholeheartedly in Canada, right? So these experiences are different in different locales. For him, America was a safe haven. And if he does write in that context, it is his experience. It is his observation. So we are on the other side of the spectrum. As readers, we have the full right to critique it. But as we look at the circumstances, we have to see the larger framework around this was to make Afghanistan known to the world. So I think he's done a good job in doing that.
Absolutely. So one of the most important things that came out after The Kite Runner was released and it became an international bestseller was that the Afghanistan War and the story of the Afghans was humanized. It stopped being a war for the Soviets or for the superpowers to fight over, and ended up becoming the stories of thousands and thousands of people living there who had to live through the ravages of war, who had to experience their homes and their loved ones being plundered, who had to experience being derooted and trying to find safe havens around the world. I completely agree. When we talk about displacement and when we talk about the refugees being accepted, if we look at the story of Pakistan and Afghanistan and the relationship that we share between the whole arrival of refugees in Pakistan after the Afghan War, especially after the Taliban War, post 9/11, but there is a disconnect because it is very difficult for people who come to accept and own that this might be the final journey, because oftentimes when you cross the border, you're thinking of safe haven for the time being and you're hoping that circumstances will permit you to go back. And that is something that we see very clearly in a lot of writing that comes out of Afghanistan, whether that be Jameen Jalkochai's 99 Nights in Logar, or that be the Kite Runner by Khalid Hosseini. What we constantly feel is that miss that the writer has for their home, their land, the smells, the sounds, the people, the mountains, the rivers. That is something that is a integral part of their identities. And even though they do find new identities, they carve out a new future for themselves, but they do want at some point in their lives sit down and question what it means to be an Afghan living in Pakistan or Afghanistan or America or Canada. And that is the question that a lot of Afghans would be pondering over. I'd like to take that thought and go to Afghanistan and ask them, because I know a lot of my friends in Kabul have had experiences with being refugees in Pakistan. I would like to understand what was going on in their heads when they came into Pakistan for some time and then they moved back, and if they would like to share their thoughts on that and what it felt to be displaced. So Afghanistan, over to you.
Alia, can you hear us?
Yep, I can hear you. Please continue.
Okay, so unfortunately, none of our students have been to Pakistan, but maybe their parents have. So I'm going to address this question myself, since I have been to Iran at least. I haven't been to Pakistan. So would you restate your question once again?
Sure. What I want to understand is what is the experience when you are displaced and when you move to a new border, when you cross the border into a new territory, and you know that that is not your territory, but you still need to make it your home for some time till you are able to go back to a place which you call home. Oftentimes you are lucky enough to go back, but sometimes you can't. So what goes on through our consciousness and our psyches as we're trying to create new identities or carve new identities for ourselves?
Okay, can you hear me, Alia?
Yep, I can.
Okay, so first of all, I'd like to keep a very positive idea about, a positive opinion about this whole immigration idea. I think there are a lot of positive things people can do when they are misplaced, even if it happens by force. For example, let's look at Khalid Hosseini himself. He used this opportunity and wrote one of the best-selling books of the history. However, yeah, we do face some challenges when we are misplaced, of course. One of the biggest challenges is the detachment that you will experience when you leave your country. You always feel this kind of attachment to your own homeland. And when you are detached from it, it's a very somehow depressing experience, because you miss your friends, you miss your relatives, you enter a new culture, and a lot of things are new to you. So mostly that is the biggest challenge. And sometimes you are mistreated by the people, and sometimes it's really not understandable, since we are Afghans. We have most of the people who have migrated to Iran have experienced this as a result of misplacement. We have been mistreated, we have been called names, We have been told that we don't belong there, so we should go back to our country. So these are the basic challenges we face. And as I said before, I'd like to keep a positive opinion about this whole immigration idea. But yeah, there are some challenges as well. Thank you so much for the question.
Thank you so much for those thoughts. I'm going to go to Rafia in Karachi, who wants to join in the conversation. And then I'm going to come back to Kabul and get some of the students to share their opinions on what they thought about the book. So Rafia, over to you.
Thank you so much, Alia. Hello everyone. Hello Kabul and everyone. Well, I really wanted to add that while I was reading the book, it took me back a few years ago, and it was more like when we had this news on television that Alan Kurdi was found on the coast, and that was kind of the experience while I was reading the book. I had this, that sentimental feelings about the thing. And that took me like, few years back, and I was just feeling the same thing that I felt that way. So it was so beautiful, and I would say kind of, heart-wrenching as well. And I would say I'm really big fan of I would say Khalid Hosseini's writing, because his rest of the books are really amazing. Just like the Kite Runner, it's so amazing, well written, and it was more like before that I had no idea that what was happening in Afghanistan and what was like being an Afghani, and that gave me a pleasure to see the what was actually happening in Afghanistan at that time, and how our I would say fellows, or I would say our brothers and sisters were being through that situation. So that was like quite heart-wrenching and such an amazing experience reading that book. And of course the three prayers as well. So thank you so much for that amazing book. I would like to thank to you and to everyone that we've been talking about these books and expressing ourselves as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that, Rafia. It's been a pleasure hosting you guys and speaking on different topics, discussing different books. And yeah, it's lovely. So so we have another student from Karachi who'd like to join in the conversation. They have a question that they would like to ask. So I'm going to move over to Nehmat Khan from Karachi, who wants to speak to his friends in Kabul. So Nehmat, over to you.
Hi Kabul. I just want to say that that you are facing very issues, and from 2019 and 2020 the violence has been rising in Afghanistan. I just said that we just feel your pain, and we don't but we just feel your little bit pain, because you are facing problem and you are the one who is facing the issues, or I think that it is not easy to face this problem, like in your own homeland you are not safe. I just want to say that you become yourself stronger. Don't lose hope. Always be prepared for your circumstance. And I think that if you face any problem, share with us. uh, we suggest you a better thing. So so I think I just want to say that please don't lose your hopes and be stronger. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those lovely prayers for Kabul and all of Afghanistan, Nehmat. Yes.
On behalf of Kabul students, I'd like to thank this very nice gentleman for your nice words. Thank you so much.
Lovely.
Thank you.
So we have Anam, who also has something that she wants to add into the conversation, and then we are coming to Kabul. So Anam, over to you.
Greetings, everyone. Hope you all are doing great. So my question is from Ma'am Hadika. So Ma'am Haq, sorry. Uh, Ma'am, I'm a fashion designing student, and it's my very first semester. And while studying about designing and all the things, I've not noticed that we usually study about the French and the British designers that are renowned, and they have done a great work in history. So I've also heard about you that you have done interior designing. So I just want to ask you, how do you balance your in your practical life? Like, we have a great history related to interior designing in India, from India, and Mughals, obviously, Mughal work, and then Britishers. So how do you balance to, do it in your practical life? And also I've heard about your research paper that is very renowned in Japan. So I do want to know about what was it about, and what is that specific thing that you mentioned in that research paper.
Thank you so much, Anam. I wish I could see you too. But thank you for hearing you. I'm glad that you've heard about that paper as well and everything. And you know about my being an interior designer. Okay, that's interesting. So the common thing between interior designing and writing is, of course, creativity. So sometimes a part of your brain is sparked a little bit more. And I think that part is always sparking. So yes, if you are creative, you can just tend to delve into any field and find some innovation. For me, actually, literature, I used to always contest, is actually science. Now, why science? Because it's not 2 + 2 = 4, but because science is all about innovation. Science cannot last if there is nothing new coming out. So I like to venture into things which are new. I like to show things which are new. Yes, I am a Mughal myself, and probably that streak is also within me. So if I trace back to my family tree, it goes back to Bahadur Shah Zafar and to the people, to the line of Mughals who were in the field of education, I think. So yeah, so that all probably comes down to me. But most importantly, what I feel is that somehow the other, because I teach students who feel that they will never be able to write, and they end up writing books, proper books, with a collection of poetry or a collection of short stories or even novellas. And that is only because, like I said, if you are someone who is in touch with the world around you, there is so much happening. The first thing that we do is narrate. Anything that we do, we are narrating. When we're talking to, like when I'm talking to you about my experiences, I'm narrating. When you talk to your friends of what happened last night or what happened the day before, you're narrating. So we're all narrators. So this is a faculty which is within us. It's just that we don't like to somehow the other chisel it. If we chisel it, we've all been narrators, and we know when and how to add some kind of element of climax or crisis to whatever we're trying to say. So that much is there. So writing, yes, with interior designing is something that I feel comes as a package deal for me, because it's creativity. With reference to your question to my paper in Japan, and well, there's another book that is coming up. It's called Dialogue on Partition. Literature knows no borders. So when we're talking about borders here, these both of these works that I'm talking about, they won prizes because I was talking about a borderless existence. So in my short collection of short stories, my first story is called From Boundaries to Boundaries. So when we think that we are moving away from a boundary for something, we are actually going into another boundary. But literature has the potential to open those boundaries to us. So my work has always been about borderless existence. This particular paper was about heteroclot world of Sikhs, Muslims, and Hindus in India, which heteroclot means, now it's a very interesting concept. It comes from dialogue and dialogism. Heteroglot means that you have multiple perspectives, multiple voices, and you do not try to subsume one voice over the other. So when I'm talking, there is no hegemony. I let you also talk. And whatever happens in our talk shows is not heteroglot, because we try to sort of pounce on the other while he's talking. The whole idea of heteroglossia is that we can all coexist, we can all contribute, and diversity is actually an amazing phenomena, which, if you remember what Trudeau also says, that we are a diverse nation, and that's the beauty of Canada. So that was the beauty of India also. So I tried to show in my research paper and the book that in India, we coexisted for centuries. And the reason why, because we had Bhakti movement, where we had the of Mughal Emperor Akbar, who tried to sort of synthesize. Now, the problem is with synthesizing, you are trying to subsume one identity. But if you let everyone live with their own ideas, their own diversities, it enriches the environment. And this is what I was trying to say. Heteroglot is like a garden where you have a bed of roses, a bed of sweet pea, a bed of pansies, and they can all coexist. All you need is a gardener. And I feel strongly that the gardener in this case is art and literature. Art and literature has the capacity to help us coexist. If you look at music for that matter, you look at our films for that matter, the books that are borderless, we can all coexist. So this is what I like to work on.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for answering my question very well.
Oh, I get to see you.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Huck, and thank you so much for such a lovely question, Anna. Let's move on to our friends in Kabul and ask them what their thoughts were on the book, and if they'd like to share some of their findings from the book with the rest of the audience. So Kabul, over to you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello to all. I read the book and I think that it was a really nice book, and I think it's not as loved or as liked or as welcomed as the Kite Runner, because I think it cannot be as original or as realistic as his other work is, like Kite Runner. And we talked a lot about humanization, about that Khalid Hosseini humanized Afghanistan. And I have a question from our guest speaker, Dr. Huck, that how much did you know before about Afghanistan, before reading his works, before Kite Runner? And what do you think, is it like this humanization of Afghanistan is similar or something exact like the real, like it's now we have, or no, you think that is like subjective, is different, is something that is not real? It's just a point of view of someone that has lived for a small time in our country, like for years he immigrated, maybe he was really young and he didn't know much about Afghanistan.
Okay, thank you for that question. May I know your name, please?
Yeah, my name is Ali.
Ali, okay. So Ali, yes, I did know about Afghanistan because, like I said, in 1979, I remember I heard about the Russian invasion. And then in the 1980, a few Afghans moved to Islamabad, and they were my classmates, actually. One of them was 18 years old and I was 12, and she was admitted in grade 8, which is a strange thing. So that was a bit of a problem too, because she felt that she should have, of course, been taken in a higher grade. And then she moved to America, and her family moved to America. And there she said that I was taken into grade 12 and I was given all the opportunities and everything. And I stayed in touch with her. So yes, but again, that is a very superficial way of knowing Afghanistan. Through Khalid Hosseini, what I learned was that some universal things are very relatable, like atrocities committed on children. Even with Sea Prayer, if you look at it, that visual had actually jolted all of us completely, because you don't like to see anything happening to children. And he has shown that. He has somehow taken us to the world of those people who have the mindset to commit such atrocities on children, as well as taken us to the homes of those who house crippled children, orphanages as well. So that I think I was not aware of. I always heard of it, but reading about it and becoming a part of it, becoming a part of Hassan, becoming a part of how he's made to dance and how he's made to feel dirty is something that I was not aware of so much so. And I think Hussaini did a good job of doing that. It is subjective, and it is interesting when you said that he stayed for a very little time in a country. But sometimes what happens is that you take the experience with you and it stays with you so much so that it's impeccable how he describes the landscape. Memory in itself is very, very unpredictable, but he manages to probably research a lot, and the creative element within him has created the Afghan world for us. I don't know, you would be the better judge whether he's done a good job of presenting Afghanistan. You would definitely be the best judge for it. But for me, it is definitely something that now touches me somewhere. I feel that's how Khalid Hussaini managed to pull it through.
Thank you for that answer.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Haq. And just adding on to what Dr. Haq said, I knew quite a lot about Afghanistan before the Soviet war, because my parents used to travel to Afghanistan very frequently. And I remember my mother telling me that they would go to Afghanistan over the weekend, because I come from the north of Pakistan, and the border from where I was into Kabul was 3 hours, and there was a bus service. And she used to tell me that whenever a new Hollywood film would come, it would be released in Kabul before it was released in Pakistan. So for catching the first show, they would travel to Kabul. I mean, she talked about the fashion that used to be there. So it was a progressive, different society. And then I remember, I'm an oral historian, and I conduct oral history interviews. I interviewed this lady, her name was Florence Williams. She was a French woman. And in the 70s, during the hippie movement, she came from America, and she traveled all over this region. She had another friend who was Iranian, so they went to Iran. From Iran, they came into Pakistan, and from Pakistan, they went into Afghanistan. And she told me, because at that time, during the hippie culture, and there was a lot of drugs that were being used, and a lot of people ventured into these areas for drugs. And she was a university student herself, and she remembers very distinctively there being a rehabilitation for students and for youngsters who would be traveling through this region and get hooked onto drugs and not have a passage back home. And the center, the rehabilitation center, was based in Kabul, and it was run purely on voluntary basis. So even before Afghan themselves became refugees, they had a culture of rehabilitation. They had a high culture of hospitality, and that kind of shows you that these addicts who were not taken in by their own countries. And she shared a memory of one of her friends who was a French, and the French embassy refused to take him back because his condition was so bad, and they knew that he wouldn't be able to survive. And they just did not know what to do with him because everyone else was going back. And she said that in Kabul, the rehabilitation center that said that, please keep him here, we will take care of him. And they left him behind and moved back. So, I mean, there is a popular narrative that exists. Then there are these parallel narratives that exist through soft literature. And then there are realities that exist in people's memories. And when you try to put them all on the same plane, or try to understand them through the same plane, you understand that all of these different narratives or all of these different stories are the stories of the same region, because every region brings within it multiple flavors. But we have stopped looking at our realities through different lenses and have tried to focus everything as a singular lens. And I think that is where our issue as societies these these days is the biggest struggle. I mean, that is the point that we all are pondering upon. And every time we come together and discuss books, one of the things that we talk about is our shared humanity. And I think through the writings of Khalid Hosseini, especially in The Sea Prayer, is that element that he picks up, because he remembers being a refugee. He remembers being an immigrant. He remembers being displaced. He remembers trying to struggle through different areas to find safe passage. And he connects it to the story of this child and his father. And that is the narrative that he brings forward. And on that note, we have 2 students from Karachi who'd like to join in the conversation. I'm going to go to Amna first, and then after Amna, we're going to go to Nemat, who also wants to add in into the conversation, and then we're going to move to Kabul for a close note, and then we're going to end this session. So Amna, over to you.
So hello everyone, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
So this is Amna Kamdar from the Citizens Foundation College. I don't have any particular question. I just want to praise the author that when I was reading the book, I felt every line and couldn't get over the author's thought. The most important part that I love was that the author isn't hopeless and still hoping for the better time to come to an end. So do I, that one day this war will come to an end, inshallah.
Thank you so much for those lovely, hopeful thoughts, Amna. Moving on to Nemat, who has something that he wants to add on. Nemat, over to you.
Hi, Dr. Haq. I just want to ask one question from you that what do you adopted from Dr. Hosseini, and is Dr. Hosseini is your friend, or what do you think about him? What do you think about her? Sorry.
No, he's not my friend. I have been in touch with some people around him, yes, and there was an opportunity that I couldn't avail at the time when I was supposed to meet him, unfortunately. But what I think of him is, again, well, of course, what he's done is a great service. What he's done is he's also tried to express what he feels. Now, writers from this region also have a sort of a responsibility on their shoulders, that they are representing a part of the world that has not been represented so much. We are used to reading about the Yorkshire pudding and the butterscotch cookies, but I always try to encourage my students to write about the samosas and the biryanis, and to let them know, let the world know that we carry flavors too. And that he's in the beginning of the book, when he talks about the flavors of Afghanistan, and from little things like the pomegranate tree and everything, he's tried to show that there is life even in the plantation there, and then what happens to that life after a war situation. Though in all his books, I feel the war has a very important element in showing that war is that particular force that destroys completely. There is no rationale behind war. In Thousand Splendid Suns, because I am one of those, I call myself like Ionesco, the writer. I've been bombed because my house was right next to the Ojri camp. So I remember what it felt like, even after the Ojri camp had erupted, that for days I would hear this sound, shoo, and then I would just wait for the blast. Would it happen on my house or not? And he described it exactly the same way in A Thousand Splendid Suns, how they are waiting for that sound to come, and then where is the blast going to be? You don't know where it is going to be. However, Nemat and everyone else, even most importantly, our lovely students in Kabul, I just like to say that it doesn't end with Khalid. See, it actually begins. So you all have experiences. You all read. If you want to talk about it, just write about it. That's the best way to be heard, to have your voice taken out to the world. Don't just rely on one author and that's it. He should be your guiding force to enable you to probably engage in more conversation, debate, and writing. So I would encourage all of you to get out there and write as much as possible, because whenever my students ask, ma'am, I don't know what to write, I say, write about what you're passionate about. I had a student who said, I'm only passionate about my brother who's autistic. So I said, okay, write about him. So she wrote as him. What service she did was that I made her read the book to parents of autistic children, so they understood what autistic children go through. And whatever experiences we go through are novel for others. So please do not think that this is it. We read someone's book and that's it. You be the light for the future generation, and try to write whichever language pleases you, whichever expression pleases you, whichever genre pleases you. Just get out there and share your experiences.
Thank you so much.
On that note, we have a comment from Burhan. Burhan, quickly, if you could add into the conversation before we move to Kabul for a closing note.
Okay, am I audible?
Yes.
So we have discussed about the challenges during migration and leaving homelands, and it is all about suffering with full emotions. But what should be the end of it? As Khalid Hussaini have a beautiful end, and he did good by his writings as well for the other refugee. And but it is not necessary for all refugees to have an end like Khalid Hussaini. So is this possible that every refugee have an end like Khadim Hussaini, and what literature have done or gonna do to make the end of every refugee at least more better with others that like their uh, situation as well?
So the first thing that literature does is that it opens up our minds to the possibilities. It inculcates in us so desire. That is what we need. I mean, the story of Khalid Hussaini is not just the success story of an author, story of the survival of a child through turbulent times. And that is the first and most important thing. What one can do is that every time all of us have circumstances thrust upon us, a lot of times these circumstances are not of our making. But if we develop empathy and if we develop the idea of opening ourselves, opening our houses, our doors to everyone who is around us and being more empathetic, being more tolerant, I think we will be able to create a better society. And that is what, at the end of the day, is required of us as human beings. On that note, let's move on to Kabul and get a closing note from them, and then we can close the session. So Kabul, over to you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, of course they can.
Do you have my sound? Okay, good afternoon to all of you. This is Hadiza Mohammadi, one of Kabul's students. So if there is something in the picture.
No problem.
Please remove it.
Okay.
Okay.
Transition. Okay, just
Okay. So I want to talk about my opinion about this book. So this book, the Sea Prayer, show us the hard life of refugee people. Show us that how hard is refugee. I don't know the situation of Pakistan, but I want to talk about the situation of Afghanistan. I want to talk about my experience. Refugee is one of our big challenges. There is war, there is exclusions, and we have a bad memory of exclusions. The people leave their country for a brighter future for them, a brighter future for their children. And as a future maker, as a young generation, I want to say that we have to keep us strong. We have to focus on positive things. And I really appreciate Khalid Hussaini because of writing this book, because he defends the refugee. He defends that the other people, the other country must keep their refugee because they really had a bad life. Migrant or refugee is not easy as much as we think. There is a really hard. Why that's hard? Because they leave their memory. They leave their country. They miss all the things. The memory, the country, the home, and it's really hard. So I wanna say, I wanna ask you some questions. Many books, especially these books, the Sea Prayer, show us a bad picture, a sadness picture about Afghanistan. It shows that how bad is Afghanistan. So what's your opinion? What's your imagination? What's your idea about Afghanistan?
Is this question directed to me?
Yeah, question ask what are you asking? It's from Alia or
About
guest speaker?
guest speaker.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Like I said initially, the initial part of some of his books are quite hopeful, and yes, in the middle, as is common with a lot of books, you have a climax section where you do feel this sense of hopelessness and this sense of wasteland quality within the landscape of Afghanistan. But at the end, he always, if you've read The Thousand Splendid Suns, at the end he talks about how happily Leila walks with her children, and despite the fact that some car splashes this tea-colored mud on her, she's happy. She's happy. That ending on that, and that smile, Sorab, I feel that happiness is amazing. To end books on a note of that small little smile is quite a quality when you have built a whole aura of destructiveness and everything. So there's something called postmodern literature where you have open-ended endings, but with Khalid Hosseini, I feel it's postmodern because there is an element of closure, and that closure comes with coming to terms with your environment, coming to terms, whether it's Afghanistan, whether it's America, whether it's Syria, whether it's another new strange land. If you come to terms with it, and moving from displacement to relocation. Relocation is a very positive word. So let's look at displacement as relocation. So I think in that context, I now see Afghanistan as something evolving, as progressive. The Afghan football team was here, the female football team. My daughter is a football player. So I remember they were here, and I was so delighted to know that a female Afghan football team came here and played at SAF games some years ago. So there is evolvement in, and so far as something is evolving, there's always hope. The only problem lies with when you move to another country and you're considered a minority. I'm against the idea of the whole concept of minority. I feel once you've been given the status of citizenship, you are merely a citizen of that place. If you are Pakistani, then you're Pakistani. It doesn't matter whether you're Christian, Muslim, Afghan, or whatever. So you are Pakistani, and then that goes for Americans also. So it shouldn't matter if you're an Afghan American, you are an American over there. So that status gives you a little bit of root to sort of grasp onto over there. So far as we continue to look at ourselves or people coming in from other lands as minority, they will be looked at as some alien creatures. So we have to first let them in on our note, and for the others to be able to relocate ourselves, to find a new home somewhere.
And on that note, I'd like to thank everyone for being such an amazing
Thank
audience.
you for the answer.
Thank you so much, Dr. Haq, for taking out time and discussing Khalid Hosseini's work with us. It was a pleasure having you, and I'm sure the students got to learn a lot from you. I know for a fact that I did. And thank you so much to my amazing participants in both Karachi and Kabul. Like always, it is a pleasure to be with you, to bounce and ideas with you. And I cannot wait to connect back with you next month with a new book and more conversations. Be safe, be kind to each other, and always remember to share a smile. And on that note, I'd like to say bye to everybody and hope to see you soon.
Goodbye.